Guys, this is my complete review of the Predator's Mark gear set, and I'm pretty sure it's the most comprehensive review of the set you'll find anywhere. As a result, this video is damn long, so I've left a TLDR here on this screen that you can read if you just want the main points, but if you're keen on all the detail, then stick around and I'll tell you why I think this is the strongest gear set that you can bring into the Darkzone. It's Skill Up here with another Division video. Today I'm going to be giving you a full analysis and theorycraft model for the Predator's Mark gear set, which has just been released in patch 1.2. This is a very strong set in specific conditions, and I feel like the community hasn't been giving enough credit to just how much extra DPS this set is able to provide, something I'm hoping to remedy with my proposed DPS model. The workings for this bit of theory crafting are in the description below, so check that out if you like a good spreadsheet. Of course, if you could drop a like, that would be really appreciated, as it does help grow my channel, and if you aren't already a subscriber, then be sure to hit that subscribe button now for the best source of Division theory crafting you will find anywhere on the intertubes. And finally, one last thing before we kick off, please completely ignore the stats on my gear. They are totally garbage, as I haven't been able to find optimal drops for recalibration yet. My crappy gear doesn't affect the way that we'll be analyzing this set though, so don't worry about that. Alright, so let's start by analyzing the Predator's Mark. It's a gear set that's available in patch 1.2, and you can get it from a variety of sources, since patch 1.2 makes it so that you can get pretty much anything from doing anything, though you do have a higher chance of earning this set in the new Clear Sky incursion. So in order to understand its value, let's break down its set bonuses one by one. First of all, the 2-piece bonus is 20% optimal range. So to be clear, this bonus optimal range works for all weapon types. It's not specific to assault rifles or pistols like the 3-piece bonus is, so that's that. So what does it actually mean? Well, you may not know it, but each weapon in the division has an optimal range, which is the maximum range from your target at which your weapon does full damage. Any damage dealt beyond the optimal range suffers a range penalty and will deal less damage per bullet than it otherwise would have. And that amount continues to go down and down as you get further and further away from your target. So if I have an SMG that has an optimal range of say 15 meters, I'll deal full damage, right? Let's say 100 damage per bullet. But as I get further and further away from that, say 16 meters, I might do 90 damage per bullet, or at 17 meters, I might do 80 damage, etc., until I'm dealing, practically no damage at all. So I've heard a lot of people, including the developers, claiming that optimal range is a really great stat to have because it makes your gun more effective at longer ranges, being particularly useful on, say, an SMG, which has a fairly low optimal range of typically around 15 meters, as compared to like an assault rifle, which typically has in the order of 30 meters, or a marksman rifle, which has an optimal range of something like 60 meters. The logic here is that if I can make my SMG work at longer ranges, then that's a good thing. And yes, unquestionably, making your SMG more effective at longer ranges is a good thing, but you have to understand the trade-offs that this stat necessitates versus your other options in the same slot. For example, if I'm using a vector with say 15 meters optimal range, and I give it 20% bonus optimal range with a scope, I've given the weapon an extra 3 meters of effectiveness, but I've traded away the ability to load more headshot damage, crit, or crit hit damage in order to do that. A trade-off that may or may not be worth it depending on how you use your SMG. Going further, if I use this 2-piece bonus on the Predator's Mark gear set and get a further 20% optimal range, I brought my SMG to a total optimal range of 21 meters, which is of course really nice, but I've sacrificed any other potential 2-piece bonus that I could get, such as 20% enemy armor damage from strikers, or 30% marksman rifle crit damage with the 2-piece hunter's gear, etc. So you have to be aware that those trade-offs exist. And then we get to the biggest challenge, reticle spread. Have you guys seen how big an SMG reticle is compared to an LMG, marksman rifle, or assault rifle reticle? I'm sure you've seen it, but maybe you haven't noticed it. The spread of those weapons at longer ranges is a big problem. So yeah, I could totally be more effective at longer ranges in terms of damage drop off, but my reticle just doesn't give me the accuracy that I need at those ranges to maintain that effectiveness. If optimal range provided both reduced damage drop off and a better, more manageable reticle, then I think it would be a really strong stat. But without that reticle management, it's really just a bit of a nice to have. The problem with optimal range becomes even more pronounced when you start applying it to pretty much any other weapon but an SMG. See, shotguns have such a low amount of base optimal range that adding 20 or 40% to that really doesn't make that much of a difference at all. We're really talking like 3.2 meters in the case of 40% extra. I would absolutely prefer to have my shotgun hitting for more damage than bank on the benefit that an extra 3 meters might provide me. For assault rifles, the problem is actually the other end of the spectrum. Assault rifles already have too much range for their stability. Have you ever tried to be 100% accurate with an assault rifle at its maximum optimal range of 28 meters? It's practically impossible, even with full stability and horizontal stability stacking. Adding even more range to an assault rifle really doesn't help them because you're going to struggle even more to use them given how hard it is to manage both the reticle and the recoil. For marksman rifles, they already have more than enough optimal range, and funnily enough, so do LMGs, but as I've discussed, LMGs really aren't in the picture at the moment until they get some buffs in the weapon balance. So the point of all of this is not to say that optimal range is a crap stat. I know that a lot of people really like it, and I definitely cannot argue the fact that particularly on an SMG, it can be a useful stat if you stack it high enough and if you're aware of the challenges associated with reticle control. My point was simply to say that you need to be aware of the trade-offs when you're doing this, and you need to be aware that that extra optimal range on things like shotguns, assault rifles, and marksman rifles is pretty much wasted. From this perspective, the added benefit provided by this 2-piece bonus is situational at best. Next up, let's talk about the 3-piece bonus provided by the gear set, which is an extra 700 damage for pistols and 800 damage for assault rifles. So let's get this out of the way first. Ignore the pistol damage. Pistols are not for damage. They are for complementing your build in some way, like applying a bleed to fleeing targets in the Darkzone, like the Damascus Stars, or cool-headed to reduce cooldown times, etc, etc. 700 pistol damage really does not do anything, so just ignore that. An extra 800 damage to your assault rifle is important. However, sadly, it's actually not that big a deal. In order to fully understand this, let's talk very quickly about the concept of stat budgeting and how it affects stuff in the division. See, in most games, each item or power-up will have a budget, which is effectively how many units of power this thing gives you. Let's say I get a sword in some game, right? And this sword might give me like 5 health, 5 damage, and 5 spell power, okay? Meaning it has an overall power budget of 15. Maybe I get another sword that gives me 15 damage, but no health and no spell power. So here we have the same item budget, which is 15, but it's just distributed differently. Now let's look at the way that Massive have applied this thinking to the division. Each gun has a power budget that is made up of a whole bunch of things, including per bullet damage, reload speed, rate of fire, and optimal range. When you look at weapon performance across all types of weapons, you see that these stats generally stay within acceptable power budgets, which is to say that, with the exception of perhaps LMGs, which have very low per bullet damage due to their very large magazines, all weapons are fairly balanced. On top of this base power budget, however, we put things like crit chance, bonus headshot damage, accuracy, and stability. Now, across weapon types, these other stats are actually horrifically imbalanced, which is why weapons like SMGs and M1A marksman rifles are so strong. They essentially benefit too much from things that I don't think Massive are properly modeling when they're doing their overall distribution of power when they do weapon design. Specific to assault rifles, it's clear that Massive have said that we want assault rifles to deal less per bullet damage versus an SMG, but have a much larger magazine, okay? And we want them to have way more range, but not to have the free bonus crit chance that an SMG has, right? So you can actually tell that this is a true statement just by looking at SMGs versus assault rifles in the game. And you'll generally find that what I've just said then about, assault rifles having less damage, but more range, SMGs having, smaller magazines, but more crit, that generally holds true across all of the different archetypes within the assault rifle and SMG category. Now, anyone that's played this game will know that this trade-off just isn't worth it. Per bullet damage is just so good because we're often firing in very short bursts rather than in longer patterns of fire. And the range bonus that we get from assault rifles is often wasted because the overwhelming majority of encounters in the division happen at very close quarters. Whether in PvE or PvP content, it's generally okay to be within 15 to 20 meters of your target because that's the point at which your reticle will be most effective and you can manage it. Beyond that, things really start to break down. So the benefit that we should be getting from assault rifles versus SMGs in terms of weapon balancing just aren't anywhere near as balanced as they should be. And I can show you exactly how that manifests here by looking at the per bullet damage on my assault rifle versus my SMG. You'll notice that I'm wearing both the 2-piece bonus, which gives me an extra 800 assault rifle damage, and I'm wearing a pair of assault rifle gloves, which gives me 500 assault rifle damage. So that's an extra 1,300 per bullet damage. And finally, I'm using an AK-47, which has the slowest rate of fire of any type of assault rifle, meaning it has the highest per bullet damage of any assault rifle, and yet its per bullet damage is only 900 damage higher than my AUG. Now, if I was to wear a pair of SMG gloves, which generally give me around 400 damage, we're talking a difference of 500 per bullet damage from the best possible, per bullet damage assault rifle in the game that's been buffed to the 9 by a 2-piece bonus and by some gloves. And for that, I get a larger mag and I get some range, but I trade away 25% chance to crit, which is just ridiculous. And there is no way that I would ever make that trade unless my target was outside of my SMG's optimal range, in which case, yes, absolutely, the assault rifle is the better choice to be using every time. So in summary, yes, the extra 800 damage is nice, but it does not bring assault rifles to the point where they are better than SMGs or even comparable. They retain their position as being the weapon that you pull out when you can't use your SMG, which is a shame. So let's hope that the weapon balancing pass in the future brings something nice to the table here. And with that, let's deal with the big one, the 4-piece bonus. This bonus applies a bleed effect to your target after 10 bullets of damage have landed without you switching target to a different target. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't miss, it just means that you can't damage anything else while you are getting those first 10 bullets stacked on your target. So how is this bleed even calculated? Well, what it should do is take the total damage that you've dealt with those first 10 bullets, including crits, headshots, and critical headshots, and add all of that up to then apply a bleed effect that delivers the same amount of damage as that over the next 8 seconds. So if I deal, say, 10 damage per bullet, then the bleed will deal 100 damage when it's applied. If I get some crits and some headshots in there, and I happen to deal a total of 150 damage over 10 bullets, then my bleed will deliver 150 damage over, 8 seconds. So now that I've explained how it should work, let's discuss how it actually works, because we all know that there's often a very large gap between how massive intents for something to work and how it actually does work. So first up, it's not actually 100% of the damage of your first 10 bullets. It's actually 112.5%. The reason for this appears to be a bug with the way that the bleed ticks, whereby you get one extra tick at the exact same second that you land your 10th bullet. Why this is this way, I have no idea, but regardless, it deals more damage than you think it should, so there's that. Now, to be super clear, bleeds do not stack in the division. Many people had been hopeful that this bleed amount would stack every 10 bullets, allowing you to, in essence, deal 100% more damage. Of course, this would just be utterly ridiculous, so no, this set will give you a nice DPS boost, but it will not give you the 100% bonus damage that you are hoping for. Sorry to disappoint. So how much DPS does this equate to? Alright, so I've seen a lot of people model the DPS associated with this set, and I have to say that I don't agree with the way that it's been modeled to date. So in this video, I'm actually going to propose something different and something that I think is a lot more in line with how this sort of game actually plays, particularly in Darkzone 5.6. So how do we model DPS for this? Well, let's quickly go over the way that the community is currently modeling this DPS increase, which essentially says that if you're firing your weapon constantly and then you adjust for reload, this 4-piece bonus will probably net you an increase of around 14% damage on an SMG. Now, I've done those calculations myself in the attached spreadsheet, so you can check those out if you're keen, but I've also put up the summary results here on screen, so you can see the kind of DPS increase that this 4-piece would net you across 4 of the most commonly used weapons. Now, just as a side note, I removed marksman rifles from this analysis because anything you shoot 10 times with your marksman rifle will already be dead, so that would be pointless. I've also removed shotguns and LMGs as the way that they deliver damage isn't designed to synergize with this set at all. So definitely do not use this set if you're planning on running an LMG or a shotgun. Now, this DPS modeling is based on this idea you are constantly firing, right? Which we know isn't always the case. And as I was very much reminded when I did my Lone Star gear set, and a lot of people didn't like that gear gear set because they felt like it wasn't possible to continue to fire. And absolutely, that's true. You do need to take cover in this game sometimes, particularly on the harder content like challenge mode incursions and DZ5-6, where enemies hit like trucks. So this modeling doesn't actually reflect the fact that you are sort of actually dealing damage while you're in cover, protecting yourself and waiting for your next opportunity to pop up and shoot, which we know is a very, very common occurrence during proper endgame content in the Division. And I think this is a really core part of what this set is about. It lets you deal damage while you're behind cover, waiting for your next chance to strike. So I think a much better way to model DPS here is actually to calculate the extra DPS it provides when we are not shooting, when we are behind cover and waiting for our next chance to fire. In my view, this is where the set truly shines, as it gives you a way to continue to deal damage whilst keeping yourself extremely safe. When we model DPS this way, we see that for the AUG and Vector, this 4-piece is just fantastic. We can essentially pop up, empty a magazine into an enemy really quickly, duck back down behind cover, and wait for the set to deal an additional 23.5% damage on our AUG or 29% damage on our Vector. So yes, absolutely, this is less total DPS than if we were constantly firing. No doubt about that, right? But it is essentially free DPS, and it is safe DPS because we're dealing this DPS while we're completely behind cover, completely safe. It's DPS that we would not otherwise be dealing, and in that regard, I actually do think it's quite a large boost in total DPS output in those sort of high damage or high risk settings, challenge mode and DZ5-6. If we take a moment to explore the mechanics of this bleed further, we find that predictably there is a huge bias towards slower rate of fire weapons with very high per bullet damage. Because it only counts the first 10 bullets, and because there is a hard 9-second timer on that bleed effect, we need those first 10 bullets to hit as hard as possible to ensure that the bleed is ticking for the maximum amount. In this way, things like the AUG, for instance, are better than the MP5 because they fire slower and they hit harder, which gets more value out of the bleed. And the same goes for something like an AK-47 versus the LVOA-C. So going further with this, we start to get a sense of how to make the most out of this gear set. We need to build for maximum weapon damage, crit chance, crit hit damage, and headshot damage. Mods like rate of fire are actually less than ideal for this gear set because you want to fire slower and hit harder. And similarly, the 3-piece assault rifle bonus is a really nice help because it does add per bullet damage. And finally, I'd really strongly recommend using a pair of gloves that has plus weapon damage aligned to your weapon of choice to ensure that your per bullet damage is maxed out. Now, one final thing that we haven't yet discussed in this modeling, and that the model really doesn't even take into account, is the benefit of something called multi-dotting, which, if anyone that hasn't played MMORPG before, it's like putting your damage over time effects on multiple targets, and a bleed is a damage over time effect, right? So, what you can essentially do here is put the bleed on one target and then switch to the next and then switch to another, and you can kind of have up to 3 bleeds ticking on your targets for a total of 90,000 damage per second while you're behind cover. And this talent, there's actually a talent as well called Shrapnel, which can spread your bleed to nearby enemies, though the chance to this will proc is around 30%. So this right there can already be a really huge DPS boost if you happen to have this proc on a pack of grouped up enemies. So absolutely do not underestimate the DPS potential of switching between your targets and applying multi-dots if you are under pressure to drop a particular target quickly. So looking at the 4-piece overall, I really do view it as around a 20 to 30% increase in DPS depending on your playstyle and weapon type. And for me, I actually view it as the best Darkzone 5-6 gear set because of the way that it enables you to continue to deal damage from behind cover. Now, I know a lot of people are going to pounce on me now and say, hey, you just released a video saying that it's okay to play anything. How could you say this is best? In that video, I was really clear that, under certain conditions, there's always going to be an optimal choice. There's always going to be one choice which edges out the other. But there are lots and lots of different ways to play the Darkzone right now. You could run tanky tacticians, you could run 3-2-1, you could run the 2-2-2 balance, you could run all sorts of stuff. But for my money, the way I'm seeing the Darkzone work, I really do think that this set is the best one to be playing with because of the way that it lets you deal damage in that really safe way. And obviously also because it provides tremendous utility in PvP, which segues very neatly into our next point. PvP. This is a really spectacular set in PvP. For those of you that weren't aware, bleed effects actually stop you from being able to run. So if you can land 10 shots on a PvP target, then you can be sure that they aren't going anywhere fast unless they pop a medkit, which will remove the bleed. So the bonus damage provided by the bleed is nice, but it's probably not going to determine the encounter, as sort of PvP in the Division is all about wearing down opponents that have stacked like 500k toughness. So, but ultimately the bleed is really valuable if you're looking to play in a sort of aggressive ganking style of PvP, or you're looking to play defensively, just being able to sort of like run away from a target. Pair that with the bonus optimal range, which is a nice to have on an SMG, but not a game changer, and the extra damage to assault rifles, and you're really looking at a very competent set that really will fare quite strongly in the Darkzone in a PvP context. And that's it, guys. Overall, I really do like this set. I love using Lone Star, and I sort of aim to use it as much as I can on easier content, or when I have a group that's able to sort of draw a lot of aggro, keep me healed, etc. But on tougher stuff, or when I don't have a group that I can rely on, I'll be sort of aiming to get my hands on a full set of this properly recalibrated, because for me, it's a great, effective, and safe way to deal damage in the Darkzone while maintaining some excellent effectiveness in PvP. I know I've been quite critical of many aspects of this set, but that's just because I've been analyzing its strengths and weaknesses in a lot of detail, and I also really wanted to dispel the myth that the sort of DPS gain in this set is minimal. I definitely would not consider it minimal. The DPS gain in this is, in my view, among the best provided by any set and should absolutely not be ignored. Give it a try, see how it feels. I'm sure you will not be disappointed. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed putting it together. It has taken me a long time because I've really struggled to think about how to properly conceptualize and model this DPS increase, and I think I've got it right this time, but I really welcome your feedback. As I've mentioned, all of the modeling is actually in a spreadsheet below, so check that in the description below, so check that out if you're keen. I'm really enjoying the work that I've been able to do on YouTube in the last 4 months, guys, so thank you for all your support, and if you'd like to drop this video a like, it would definitely go a long way towards sort of helping my channel grow further. If you haven't subscribed already, hit subscribe, as I'll be dishing up plenty more 1.2 coverage over the coming weeks. And next week, I'm actually going to E3, where I'll be going behind the scenes to have a look at the upcoming expansion. I'll be sort of going hands-on with that. So yeah, so stick around if you're keen for that kind of news, because I'm sure it's going to be quite exciting. Guys, take good care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the Darkzone. Bye-bye.